Hey, it's Vicky, and today I'm here with another episode from my vlog series, Books and Baking. I'm sitting in my basement because it's quiet down here and it's cooler. I've reached that point in the summer where I am over it and I want fall to be here. I want hoodies, I want Halloween, I want all the fall things. And yeah, I'm sitting in my basement because my children are here and they're loud and I needed someplace quiet to film. So we're filming this intro in the basement. So as I mentioned, I am here to do another episode of Books and Baking, which is a vlog series that I started on my channel this year, where basically I read, well, the last two episodes have been cozy mysteries, where I read a book. And like I said, the last two episodes were cozy mysteries that included recipes, and so I review the book and the recipes as I sort of go along. And I, in my last video, asked for some suggestions from you guys. If you knew of any books, they didn't have to be cozy mysteries, but any books that contained recipes that I could do for this series. And somebody had mentioned the book that I'm going to be doing. I don't recall the person's name. If I remember, I'll put it here. But they basically recommended this book, and they said it's not a cozy mystery, it's a little bit more hard-hitting, but it's a great book. And that book is The Sweetness of Forgetting by Kristen Harmel. And this one, so yeah, this one is different than the ones I've previously done in this series. From what I gather from reading the back, it's about a woman named Hope who lives in Cape Cod, which is a setting that sounds awesome. And she's having kind of a rough go in life. She has recently gone through a divorce. She has lost her mother to breast cancer, and her grandma, who she calls Mamie, is in a nursing home, and she has Alzheimer's. And she's getting to the point where she's not really remembering much anymore. But one time when she is visiting her grandmother, she has sort of a lucid moment and tells her some things about her past. Her grandmother is from France and came over to America when she married her grandfather, who was an American soldier in World War II. So they met during World War II, and she came back to America with him after the war. So she starts to mention some things about her past that she's never talked about before, and it sort of gets Hope curious, and it leads her back to France to sort of find out more about her grandmother and her time before she came to America. And this one, the sort of tie-in is that she is currently running her grandmother's bakery because she is in the nursing home, and her mother, who was running it, passed away. So she is running things. Though she, it wasn't her dream or anything, they're running the show. And so that's where the sort of baking aspect comes in, because the recipes, I'm assuming, are going to be recipes that she's making there in the bakery. So this seems like, yeah, it has sort of I don't even know what to call it, because I don't know if it's going to go back in time and show you like the perspective of her grandmother, where it'll have sort of a historical fiction vibe, or if it's just like strictly sort of contemporary general fiction. But yeah, I'm really excited. The book itself contained, I want to say 9 or 10 recipes. I picked 5, and I tried to pick them. I have them tabbed right now. I kind of tried to pick them so they were spread out a little more throughout the book, and so that they're all different. So I don't have like 5 cookie recipes that, they're all sort of different things, but they are all baked goods, all sweet things. So yeah, I'm really excited. I already went to the grocery store and picked up the ingredients that I'm going to need. There were a couple things that I couldn't find that I still have to try to go to another store and find, but for the most part, I am ready to go. And I'm gonna get started. And honestly, the first recipe, which is one that I am going to make, shows up 25 pages in to the book. So I think I'm gonna be baking today, which works out well, because I actually later today, we are doing like a family gathering with some of Austin's siblings. So I can make these goodies and take them to the gathering. So that's my plan. So yeah, I'm gonna get reading, and when I have a check-in for you, I'll give you my initial thoughts on the book and on the first recipe. All right, so this recipe was North Star vanilla cupcakes, because the bakery in the book is called North Star Bakery, I believe. They're not the prettiest looking cupcakes. My icing, frosting, whatever you want to call it, skills are not the greatest, but it was fun to make the frosting. The only thing I'll say before a taste test is the batter, when I made it, was super thick. It was really hard to get the batter into the little paper cups. It was like the thickest batter ever. Normally I'm used to like just kind of pouring, and there was no pouring this. It was so thick. So I don't know how these are gonna turn out. I hope they're good, because I am taking them to a family gathering. So let's just, so they're sort of oddly shaped because they didn't pour nicely into the paper liners. Okay, I took half the cupcake off there, but okay, here we go. Wow. These are good. Very sweet. And the batter, like the cupcake itself, is like dense. That's probably why the batter was so thick. It's a very like dense cupcake, but if you like vanilla cupcakes, I mean, you can't really go wrong here. Whew. Okay, as for the book update, I read a little bit past this recipe. The recipe came up on page 25, and I read to page 48, so I read the first 4 chapters. And so you're introduced to Hope, and yeah, her life, like, I feel like Kristen Harmel really paints a picture that Hope is not very happy in her current life situation. She is feeling like she's living someone else's dream. She never had a desire to continue running her family's bakery, but she kind of was pushed into it. She wanted to be a lawyer. Her husband, her ex-husband, I should say, is a lawyer, and so he got to kind of fulfill his dream. That's where they met, was law school. And they had a child. That's pretty much why they got married, was because they had a child, and she's now 12, I think, 11 or 12, and her name is Annie. And she's definitely in that stage where she is just pushing buttons and just saying like the nastiest things that she can say to her mom. You know how preteens and teens can be. Sometimes they can just be very savage with the things they say and the things they do, and Annie is definitely one of those kids. Obviously she's going through a lot. Her parents are divorced. She just lost her grandma to cancer. Her great grandma is in a nursing home and is losing her memories, so she's going through a lot too. So yeah, you sort of get the vibe that Hope, though, our main character, is just, yeah, she is going through it right now because she's having financial issues. Like I said, her marriage is over. She's lost, you know, her mother. All these sorts of things are just happening. So yeah, you're getting the sense just here in the first 50 pages that she's pretty sad. But the mystery has sort of been started already because Rose, who is Hope's grandmother, the one who has Alzheimer's, she starts calling Annie by a different name, this name that neither of them have ever heard before. And they're like, who is this? I think it's Leona. They're like, who is Leona? And so they have no idea. They even ask some of the other like elderly ladies in the neighborhood, like, do you know who she was talking about? And they're like, no. So that's kind of got this sort of ball rolling with like, who is she talking about and why? And like, why is it popping up now and all this sort of thing? So the sort of, I guess, mystery aspect, if you want to call it that, has sort of been introduced. But yeah, so far it has. I like the vibes. It's Cape Cod in the fall, so that's a great setting. Although I know that eventually the book's going to take us to France, so we'll see. But so far it's a good book. It's not really cozy in the sense that like a lot of the subject matter is actually pretty sad. But the setting is cozy. The whole, you know, being in a bakery is always, I think, a cozy sort of feeling, a sort of cozy place. So yeah, I'm gonna keep reading and I will give you an update later. I just did not have time yesterday to try my cheesecake. We weren't home pretty much the whole day, so I have a piece now that I'm eating on my Sonic the Hedgehog paper plate. And I'm gonna give it a taste test. Wow. That's a really good cheesecake. I've never made a cheesecake before. I've never made my own crust. My crust was a little funky, like I didn't spread it enough in the pie pan, so there isn't like a crusty edge around the entire thing. But when you do get the crust on the bottom, it's good. So all in all, this is a solid cheesecake. Hey guys, so I thought I would give you an update on The Sweetness of Forgetting. I haven't read in a couple of days. I don't normally like to share a lot of personal stuff on my YouTube channel, just because I feel like you guys aren't here for that. You're here for bookish stuff, and there are things about my personal life that I do like to keep personal, but I feel like what we have been going through the last couple of days does sort of tie in with my feelings about this book. Without going into too much detail, Austin and I both lost our grandmothers in the same evening, which was really tough. Both were not exactly unexpected deaths, but still, you know, even when, you know, people that you love are getting up in age, or in the case of Austin's grandma, she did have cancer, you do start to sort of mentally prepare yourself for, you know, when they inevitably will go. But even so, when they go, it's still really hard. So that's what we kind of have been dealing with the last couple of days. And I just haven't touched a book. I wasn't in the mood to read. But I'm feeling a little better now, and I figured I'm ready to pick back up. And I guess the reason I wanted to mention it here was because this book does deal with a woman who is trying to find out about her grandmother's history, which in turn is her history, because her grandma, for various reasons throughout our main character's early years, never shared that information, and now wants her to know about it, especially because her grandmother does have Alzheimer's and she can't remember everything all the time, and wants her to find these things out. So this is very much about her basically, you know, trying to find her history, because it does affect her. And I just think that's a really important theme. And obviously it's something that's been on my mind. I've had grandmas on my mind the last couple of days, and just how important it is to talk to your elderly relatives, if you have relationships with them, of course. I know not everyone does, but if you do have relationships with grandparents, great-grandparents, great-uncles, aunts, all that sort of stuff, I think it's so important to talk to them about their lives and what it was like for them growing up, and because you'll learn a lot about them, and you'll learn a lot about just, I feel like, your family history. And it's just so interesting how, when you really start to think about it, how many just maybe small decisions led, you know, for example, led your grandparents to meet. And like, if that wouldn't have happened, you wouldn't be here, and that sort of thing. And just sort of the legacy of family members. And, you know, especially the ones, like I said, that are up there in age, that usually have so many interesting stories to tell. It just has me really thinking about that lately. So, and that does, like I said, tie into this book, because that is what our main character Hope is doing in this book. Is she's out there, she travels across the pond to France to find out about her grandma's early life, because for reasons that she doesn't quite know, her grandma never shared. And so, yeah, I like that it touches on that, and in relation to the food aspect too. I love how this book, because, you know, it's incorporating recipes, and so in those recipes do have a you know, an import in the story. They're important to the story is what I'm trying to say, because in many ways you know, food is tied to culture and to, again, our histories as people. You know, you pass down recipes from generation to generation, and it in ways that kind of keeps, you know, a person alive, a person's memory alive, a legacy, you know, and how important those types of things are to our lives and to having that connection to our past or to, you know, our family's past. And this book, I think, does a great job of showing that, you know, Hope, our main character, has, you know, been running her grandmother's bakery, having no idea really where these recipes came from. She assumed that they came from France, where her, you know, where her grandmother was from. And, you know, she finds that some of them have more of a history than she thought, and maybe don't necessarily come from France. And that whole thing is just so fascinating to me, just the importance of like food in our culture and in our families. And so, yeah, I mean, I have just been having a lot of thoughts. And I think, like I said, it could be because of just what's going on right now. And, you know, how much I love my grandmas, and how much I will miss them. And I do have recipes from both of my, you know, from both Austin's grandma and my gram. And now I have that part of them sort of I can carry with me, and I can pass it down to my kids and so on. And it's just, it's really special. So I have reached the point in the book. The next recipe is a blueberry muffin recipe, which is interesting because in the very first video that I did for this series, there was a blueberry muffin recipe. So I'm kind of intrigued to try this one and maybe compare them a little bit because they are different. The recipe in here calls for like fresh blueberries to be used in the batter. The one I did in the first video was a little different. It did not use fresh. And this one also has, you use sour cream in it, which I don't remember if the other one did. So that's kind of different, I think. So yeah, I'm gonna be making those. And then I only have about 130 pages left of the book, but I still have 2 more recipes to do. So yeah, so I'm gonna get baking. And I don't know, I might not do another check-in until I finish the book, because 130 pages, I feel like that's a pretty good chunk to kind of save till the end. So we'll see. I'm gonna get baking and I'll check in when I can. So I know I said I wasn't gonna do an update until I finished the book, but I wanted to do an update on the recipes before I finish the book, because I do have one more recipe to go. But before I do that one, I wanted to talk about the two that I've done that I haven't talked about yet. So I think in my last check-in, I was about to do the blueberry muffins, and they turned out really good. They were top-notch. If I were to compare them to the recipe that I did in the very first vlog in this series, I think these ones were better. And the reason is, I think because the recipe was just more simple. If I remember right, the other one, you had to get frozen blueberries, but also blueberry pie filling, which to me, though it was interesting, I don't think it really affected the flavor very much. And I also felt like I was wasting a lot because you had to buy a whole can of pie filling, and I think you only used a 1/4 cup of the actual pie filling. So I just felt like I was wasting stuff, where in this one you just use fresh blueberries, which I tend to have in my fridge all the time. So I don't know, it felt like it was just an easier recipe, and it turned out really good. The streusel on top, if I had to change anything, I would be a little more generous with the streusel. What was the streusel made of? It was like butter, sugar, cinnamon. Was that what it was? Flour, I think. And I had a lot left over after sprinkling it on the muffins, and I think that that's indicative of I need to use more next time, because I had a lot left and it was really good. Like, you can be very liberal with the streusel. So that's the only thing I would change about that recipe. It was great. And then I made some cookies. They were cinnamon almond cookies, and they were pretty good, pretty easy to make, like relatively simple ingredients. I did have to get almond extract, which is not an extract I typically have in my pantry, but so I did get that, and then it just had the extra step of having to roll the dough kind of in like 5 separate logs and freeze them in the freezer for a little bit just to firm them up. So that little extra step wasn't a big deal, but it just took a little more time. You kind of had to account for that when you were baking. And they kind of turned out a little more like crunchy. They're more of like a crunchy, crispy cookie, which kind of reminded me of the like windmill cookies that you buy, that like when you bite into it, it's like, it like cracks. But it kind of also, like if you just like let it sit in your mouth, it'll just sort of melt and dissolve. And that's kind of what these cookies did. They kind of reminded me of windmill cookies. I think they're a great dunker if you like to like dunk cookies in your coffee or hot chocolate or whatever. They would be a great dunker cookie. So yeah, those were really good too. And now I'm to the last recipe, and I'm making overnight meringue cookies. And I picked this recipe because in my last vlog that I did for this, I did a key lime pie that had a meringue topping, and I had so much fun making that meringue. I'd never made it before. I was really intimidated. I was really scared, and it was so fun to make. It turned out really cool. And so when I saw that there was this recipe, I had to do it. So, and the other cool thing about this one is that you make the meringue, you put them on the cookie sheet, you preheat your oven, but then you put them in the oven and turn the oven off, and you leave them in there overnight, hence the name overnight meringue cookies. And that to me is really interesting. And how's that gonna work? And I don't know. So the recipe is very simple. It just calls for egg whites, sugar, vanilla, and chocolate chips, I think, is the only thing. So very simple, and I'm really excited to see how they're gonna turn out in the morning. So yeah, I'm gonna get those going, and then yeah, I'm hoping I have about 40 or 50 pages left of the book. I'm very close to the end. So I'm hoping that tomorrow I will be able to review the meringue cookies, finish the book, and then I'm gonna do like a final check-in of the book and also give you a ranking of the recipes, which ones I liked best and how I would rank them. So I will see you tomorrow. All right, so I finished The Sweetness of Forgetting. Sorry if the lighting's weird and if you can hear the thunderstorm that is currently happening. We're having a really good summer thunderstorm right now. But I did want to talk about my thoughts on the book, but first I wanted to talk about the recipes and kind of rank them and tell you guys which ones I loved or which ones were my fave. So I would say there were 5 recipes that I did in this book. If I had to go like from 5 down to 1, I would say probably in 5th place is actually the very last recipe that I did, which were the overnight meringues. And for me, this was a texture thing. They were sweet, and the chocolate chips, because it was like meringue basically with chocolate chips in it. The chocolate chips really elevated things. For me though, it was the biting into it where it was kind of crunchy but sticky. It was kind of just a weird texture for me. But Austin and Hunter loved them. Leia and I were on those. So that would probably be my 5th place. In 4th place, I would put the ones I made before that, the cinnamon almond cookies, basically just because for me, again, it was a little bit of a texture thing. I actually prefer my cookies to be really soft and like doughy almost. And these are not. These were more, like I said, kind of like dunker cookies. Great to have with like milk or something if you like to dunk your cookies. So that, again, it was just a matter of personal preference. They're still great tasting. They were easy to make. No issues. In 3rd place, I'm gonna go with the blueberry muffins. They were super yummy. I loved the streusel on top. Really simple recipe, but really good. I would definitely make those again for myself because oddly enough, my kids don't really, they love blueberries, but they're not big on blueberry muffins. But Austin and I loved them, so I would definitely like make a batch of those for him and I to have. So yeah, those were good. 2nd place, I'm gonna go with the cheesecake. I believe it was called a lemon grape or something, which intrigued me. That's the whole reason I wanted to make that recipe, which I don't think I ever mentioned throughout this vlog. Like really talked very much about the cheesecake. I know I taste tested it and it was amazing. And I was intrigued though because it did have white grape juice in it and lemon zest. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, because I've never made my own cheesecake before. And so it was kind of fun making that one. I was really worried about like the texture being right, but it was good. It was great. I actually am the only one in this house that likes cheesecake. So what I did was I cut individual pieces and now I have them in the freezer. So when I feel like having cheesecake, I'm gonna pull a slice out and have it because it was divine. The only other thing I would say about the crust was that I didn't really spread it very well in the pie pan. So there wasn't really an upper crust to the cheesecake, but it tasted phenomenal. So it looked a little funky, but it tasted phenomenal. Loved it. And then in 1st place are actually the very first recipe that I made, which were the vanilla cupcakes. They were so good. Very like dense, rich. Like I could definitely only eat like one. It was fun making the frosting, and then I took them to a family gathering that we were having with a bunch of Austin's siblings who were in town, and I sort of left them there and didn't say anything. I just was like, oh, I made these cupcakes. And later in the day, they were like messaging me like, you made these cupcakes? Like, these cupcakes are amazing. How did you make these? Like, they loved them. So that might have also elevated my rating, was I thought they were really good. And then the people that ate them also in the family devoured them and loved them. So yes, I will probably make those again as well. So now getting into the book. The book I'm going to give 4 stars to. I think this is just an example of like reading a book at a particular time in your life when you're going through a particular thing and it just hits differently. And that's definitely what this book was. This book is about family history, and family bonds, specifically grandmas, and losing 2 grandmas in one day, while reading this book, it hit me differently. It really touches on, I think I mentioned, the importance of, you know, knowing your family's story, and knowing and being connected to that history. And it's not necessarily about like you have to love it or you have to love the people in your family, but it's just about having that knowledge because it is a part of who you are. And also the importance of food and passing down traditions like recipes, and how that is also like such a big part of your heritage and things like that. The only other thing about this book that I don't think I've mentioned is I also really loved how it touched on how experiences and traumatic things that can happen to a person can affect families for generations. Hope, our main character, her grandma was traumatized, like a lot of people, by the events that happened during World War II. And those events affected the way that they affected her marriage afterwards. It affected the way that she parented her child. And in that way also affected the way that her child parented. And in the end of her life, she sort of realized that those events, though, you know, her daughter and her granddaughter obviously were not alive for those things affected them too, because it affected her and it changed her as a person. And so I really loved how it touched on that too, how things like war and just other traumas can affect people for generations to come. It's not always just about the people that are living through it, but how it shapes and affects us as human beings. And so I also really loved that. So yeah, overall, this was a good book. The recipes were on point. The story was really good. It was good. So I want to thank, I can't remember who it was exactly, but the subscriber that specifically recommended me this book for this series, because otherwise I would have never known this book existed, because I'd never heard of it before it was brought to my attention. So thank you so much. And yeah, I would say if you like just sort of general fiction, sort of family drama, family mysteries, I guess, especially ones that center around World War II, I would say pick this up and go ahead and make the recipes, at least those 5, because there are I think like 5 other recipes that I didn't make because of time, but maybe down the road I'll try. So yeah, that is it. This was a good read. I'm glad I did it. It was perfect for books and baking. I like that it was a little bit different from the other 2 books that I had done in this series. So yes, that's all I have. So thank you guys for following me along in this vlog, and yeah, that's it. I hope you guys are having a wonderful week, and I will talk with you soon. Thank you so much for watching.